welcome to Little Race Nature Center. My name is Natalie. For those of you that don't know me, I know I've been behind the camera a lot, so we're switching it up today. Lee's behind the camera and I'm over here. And I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite animals here at the zoo. But before we get into that, they might have just ruined the surprise. I just want to tell everyone thank you so much for watching us all the time. Thank you for all the comments and questions. And also the reason I'm doing the one today is because one of our volunteers actually requested that we do a talk on these guys. We did one a while back, but it's always good to refresh everyone's memory in case you guys missed that one about them a while back. But let's get to it. Today I'm going to be talking about the straw-colored fruit bats. So I don't know if you guys heard them or if you recognize their little noises, but that's who we are going to be refreshing our memories on today. There's a whole bunch of them back there as well, and these guys are pretty neat. Like I said, they're one of my favorites for a few reasons. Number one, I do spend a lot of time in here, as all the animal care staff do, and that's because they do require a lot of care. So we've had a lot of time to sort of bond with them and spend time and listen to them and observe them in their semi-natural environment. So we obviously try to create as much of their, or sort of mimic their habitat as much as possible. So hence you see all the trees, so allows them to roost and all that. So these guys actually come from Western Africa, and they range in a lot of different countries. So I'm not going to list them all, but there are, they go from Africa to Asia even. And the coolest thing about them is what a lot of people know them for is they're fighting a little bit there. Is that they actually have the largest migration of any mammal in the entire world. So this happens every year, and it happens between October and December, and these guys gather of numbers up to 10 million of these. And they come from all over Africa. They all gather in a park called Kasanka National Park, and it's located in Zambia. And the reason they do this giant migration is because of the abundance of fruit. And this abundance of fruit in this park happens right after the first rain. So basically these guys get ready. They know wet season's coming, or the first rain is coming. And they all head over there. And they sort of stay there. They eat a lot. They actually eat up to twice their own body weight every single night while they're over there, so that they have all that energy for their long trek back when they're done. The trek is actually really long. Some of them travel thousands of kilometers. And the way they're able to actually do this is because these bats, compared to some other ones, have much longer wingspans, and so it actually allows for more endurance rather than agility. So they're not so good in tight spaces like a lot of other bats in caves, and so they tend to actually go for larger canopy trees where they have lots of room to move around. Now, you'll notice they all most of them, there are some, independent bats here in the colony as well, but most of them do gather in one area. And this area that they're in, the whole group of them, is actually called the roosting site. And they spend most of their day roosting. They actually clean themselves, they communicate. These guys, as you can tell, have lots and lots of different vocal sounds. It's still quite unknown what they're saying and communicating to each other, but they tend to do it a lot when they're roosting. Even when they're eating, you'll hear them like eating and and talking to each other, and it's really adorable. But they did already eat this morning, as you can see. Although in the wild, they would do most of the eating, even here, not just in the wild, they would do most of their eating at night. So they are nocturnal feeders. And that's because, obviously, less predators at night. They go out and they forage for fruit. Guys, I'm trying to talk. So loud. They're trying to help me. They forage for food at night. And although their colonies can go from, one colony can be from 1,000 to even 1,000,000 bats, They do split up into smaller groups, and these smaller groups that make up the colony are called clusters, and they go for up to like about 100 bats. And at night they actually split those clusters into even smaller groups when they forage. So they kind of leave, they find their food, and then they come back and they all gather together again in their little clusters again. Speaking of eating, we'll talk a little bit about what they eat. So I'm sure you've figured out already, fruit bats, they eat fruit. They are frugivores for the most part, but they don't strictly eat fruit. That is their favorite for sure, so a lot of our food budget goes towards these guys. They eat twice, sometimes 3 times a day, depending on the season. Sometimes we find that if they eat all their food right away, then we do a midday feeding as well. But otherwise they get fed at night again. So in the morning we do this puree. I know it looks a little nasty, but it's actually quite nice. It's mostly fruit. And it also has a monkey diet in there as well for a little bit of extra protein. And we mix it in there, we make it a puree because they don't like the taste of the monkey chow, so we actually trick them into eating it by mixing it with the fruit. And they do end up eating most of it, so they get all the nutrients and minerals and all that fun stuff and protein that we want them to get. And then at night, we do a couple of different things. So we do a very finely chopped fruit, again, like any variety we can get. We try to go for more exotic fruits, but obviously everyone knows they're a bit more expensive. So we mix in, apples and stuff that they're a little bit cheaper as well, but we do go for mangoes, kiwis, papaya is one of their favorites. In the wild, they would, I can't even hear myself. Oh, guys. In the wild, they would also eat dates, figs, flowers. They actually eat flowers from a tree called the baobab tree. It's an African species. Hey, stop fighting. So you can see they do fight. I don't know if you can see that in the back. There's a couple fighting there. And not sure why they do it. Maybe, one's crossing into the other one's roosting spot or whatever it is. But they do, oh, there they go again. Yeah, those two don't seem to get along very well. But yeah, so back to their food. They eat lots of flowers, they eat buds, young leaves, and what's really cool about them is for them to actually get moisture. Sometimes they chew on soft woods. Now obviously most of the stuff we have in here has dried out because it's mostly decor, but in the wild that's what they would do. And we noticed actually when we first put in the trees, or when we first moved them into the enclosure, they were chewing on certain spots, and I have found sort of chew marks. So they may still be doing it because the humidity does sort of stay in here a little bit, but pretty neat. They're very used to us, so like I said, we're in here 2-3 times a day. We clean them in the morning. We also do the feeding at night where we give them the chopped fruit, which we top up with a nectar. The nectar's got all kinds of stuff. It's got fruit juice, or fruit nectar, sugar, wheat germ, baby cereal, lots of different ingredients. Okay, wow, that one was really not happy with that one. Oh, there's 2 males. Sometimes they can probably get pretty territorial, so that's, they are extremely social animals, right? They talk to each other. The moms can even find their babies by their call, so every baby has a unique call. So really cool little things, but like I was saying, they are pretty used to us, so you can see he's not running away as I'm standing right next to him. We actually sometimes even hand feed them. We take a piece of fruit when we do the evening portion of their feeding, and they'll eat right from our hands. So they're actually really even social with us to a degree. And around the enclosure we'll also hang like large rings of like cantaloupe and papaya, bunches of bananas, and this encourages them to move around. So they're not just eating from 5 feeding stations. They're actually forced to kind of go everywhere like they would in the wild. So that's something that we try to do a lot of, which is sort of like food enrichment for them. And you can see up here we have a heat lamp for them, so that's probably why they mostly pick this roosting spot, so it's a little bit warmer as well. At night the red light turns on, so they always have that heat, so always nice and comfortable for them. When it comes to reproduction, the mom usually has one baby, and the baby is called a pup. And the gestation period for these bats is around 4 months, which varies because sometimes they have like a delayed implantation, so that's when it's 4 months. If the baby or the egg is implanted right away, then it's a 9-month gestation period, so kind of like us. So it really depends, and normally birth happens around February. And they're pretty dependent on the mom when they're first born. So they can't do anything for themselves. They can't fly, they can't find food, they obviously suckle, and at around 4 months of age, they begin to become more independent. And the mom starts to wean them off. So she starts to introduce them to foraging and finding their own fruit and so on. And this usually happens around wet season. So when there's tons of fruit available, she doesn't want to send them off on their own when they're still sort of learning their ways and there's not that much food, so they have to fight with, there's a lot more competition if there was a lack of fruit. What's really cool is they actually gather in something called maternity clusters or maternity colonies, and it's just basically a bunch of clusters of females, and so this happens around the time that all the babies are born, and they just kind of all hang out together and helps them find their babies easier as well, if they're all sort of, all the babies are in one area rather than spread out throughout the entire colony. These guys, although they are found in a lot of different places, and there's still tons and tons and tons of them, obviously, like I mentioned, up to 10 million of them gathering, they are actually near threatened. In fact, I can't remember exactly which country it was, but there was one of the colonies went down from like 250,000 to 40,000 just in 40 years. So they're declining quite a bit, despite the fact that there's still tons of them. Oh, now these guys are fighting. So, but the great thing about them is they are extremely adaptable. So they range, they can live in, obviously prefer tropical rainforests because that's where all the fruit is. But they can go, sub-Saharan, savannas. They can even live in urban jungles, so near cities and all. So they can adapt very, very well, and that's why they've been able to survive so long and do so well without becoming threatened, although they are near threatened. These guys, why we don't want them to leave is because they're actually extremely important for the rainforests. In fact, if we didn't have these guys in some of the rainforests in Africa, the rainforest probably wouldn't even survive. And that's because these guys are not just pollinators, but they are also seed dispersers. So they pollinate the flowers because they eat flowers, so they go from flower to flower, kind of like bees. And then they also disperse seeds through their feces, which sounds really gross, but it helps keep a lot of different plant species and fruit trees and things like that alive. And so the rainforest survives, actually not solely due to them, but a lot of the contribution comes from these straw-colored fruit bats. And the main thing I actually forgot to mention in the beginning was why they're called straw-colored fruit bats, but I'm sure you figured that out by now, is their color. So their color ranges from yellow, like a bright yellow, to an orange, sometimes to light brown. And this also varies depending on whether it's a male or a female. And so the males actually have a much brighter color and much darker brown. Whereas females, I don't know if we can find one. There's one right there actually. That's a female there. You can see she's not as bright. So it's still got that yellow tint, but actually two females right beside each other. Whereas the guy in the back, you can see he's got a much brighter yellow-orange neck. The males are also bigger. And these guys can actually range from 14 to 23 centimeters. Obviously the females on the lower side, males on the longer side. And their weight is around 230 to 340 grams. And pretty good lifespan as well for them. They live about 15 to 20 years on average. So some of these are probably actually right up there. They're in their late late tens. Is that
teens? Yeah.
Teens?
Yeah.
Is that the right? Am I saying it right? So they're almost around 20 now. So they only maybe have a few more years to go. We have lost a few due to age in the last couple of years as well. We also have some younger ones, and we're calling maybe around 10 or 12 years old. So they still got almost another 10 years to go. And I think they're cutting me off because they're like, stop talking, get up. I'm like, that's enough. But yeah, I hope you guys learned a lot. Like I said, we do enjoy our time in here with them. They definitely take a lot of produce to feed and keep happy, but they're always very entertaining. And we always, I actually try to spend time in with them to try to understand what their communication is, because it's not very well known. People have done research and tried to sort of study them, but it's very hard to understand why they do certain vocal sounds versus others. But pretty neat overall. I hope you guys enjoyed them. If you have any questions whatsoever or requests for other Facebook Lives, we're more than happy to fulfill those. I know some people prefer certain mammals or certain reptiles, and we don't want to always go by our agenda, so we want to make you guys happy as well. So just let us know. Oh, pulling him back. Wow, really intense. Sorry, lots going on. The one's trying to get away, and the second one's pulling him back. And but yeah, let us know if there's anything you want to see or learn about. I hope you guys learned enough about these today. And we'll see you guys tomorrow at 11:30. Probably I'll be behind the camera again, so you'll see Lee. And hope you have a great day. Thanks again for all the support and donations and everything that's coming in. And yeah, hope you guys had a great time. We'll see you tomorrow.